The Indianapolis Colts hope to keep pace in a tough race for the AFC playoffs, while the New England Patriots might be poised to play spoiler on Thanksgiving weekend. Locked On Colts, Locked On Patriots, crossing the streams on Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Colts fans and Patriots fans, thank you for joining us here on this Week 13 crossover episode of Locked On Colts and Locked On Patriots. Jake Arthur representing Locked On Colts. I'm Mike Debate hosting Locked On Patriots. Jake, I've been telling my listeners all week long that even though the personnel changes on both sides, if you squint and you really look close enough, you can still see number 18 and number 12 going at it. But obviously, Indy in a much better spot to make this season a success than New England. But there's still a lot of memorable matchups here, both regular season, postseason. Who knows, folks? Could we be on the verge of another classic? Jake and I are going to hope to pique your curiosity on that very subject today. But bottom line, my friend, thank you so much for joining me here today. Always an honor to cross the streams with you, bud.
Of course, good to be here, even though the teams may not be so hot. You know, bad teams can really put on a show sometimes. You really never know how it's going to go. So maybe the Colts and Browns put together almost 70 points in a game last year. So let's get weird with it.
That's true. Absolutely, folks. Always be ready for a good one. And anytime Thanksgiving weekend is factored in, you want to up that ante a little bit. Prior to recording today, Jake and I were talking about how this has a Thanksgiving game type feel. It's an old rivalry. You see a lot of old friends. A lot of nostalgia is kicked up by this. Jake, let's start there because the Indianapolis Colts, obviously, is the visiting team coming in, enter this matchup 5-7. They're still very much in the hunt for a spot in the AFC playoffs, sitting at the number 9 seed as we speak. That's been an up and down season for Indy, but there is still a lot of talent in all three phases of the game when it comes to your Indianapolis Colts. From a Colts standpoint, what would you say is the marquee storyline heading into this weekend's matchup against New England?
Yeah, this offense, it's week 13 and you're still searching for an identity on offense, which is probably not great. Obviously, there's been the quarterback switches, but in the 2 games since Anthony Richardson has been back in the lineup, he's played a lot cleaner, a lot better football. Obviously, the stats don't really show that from last week, 11-28. Statistically looks a lot like that 10-32 game against Houston several weeks back that ultimately got him benched, but just not the same whatsoever. A lot of drops in that game. The offensive line starting 3 rookies because how banged up they are. Just drops, miscommunications with pass catchers, no run game. Richardson basically just, he's playing a little cleaner. His mechanics and footwork are better, but just it's hard to get anything going and establish any rhythm when everything around you is just kind of faltering. So this week, hopefully the Colts can establish the run. They're kind of hell-bent on wanting to get that established, but Shane Steichen will kind of pull the ripcord at what seems to be the first sign of trouble in the run game. So he will not be afraid if Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson are only, trudging out 3-4 yards per run through the first quarter. I would expect to see more passes come through. But that's really what they want to do. They want to establish the run in this one. I think reading between the lines, there's probably going to be a new starter at right guard. They've been starting a rookie undrafted free agent, Dalton Tucker, for the majority of the year because Will Fries, who's playing really good football, broke his lower leg and had to miss the rest of the season. But, Tucker was performing as he should as a rookie undrafted free agent. But eventually that just became too much to deal with. And like I mentioned, we were starting 3 rookies on the offensive line. It's just a lot. So I think they're probably going to put a new starter in there. Shane Steichen has been non-committal on it. He's basically said, we're looking at some things. And anyone who's, paid attention to the quarterback situation knows if he uses any wishy-washy language like that, it means a change is probably coming. So let's establish an identity on offense, whatever it is. If there's a lot of man coverage being played in this one, you might see more shots over the top. It looks like in the run game, though, New England might be the get right game for this one because it looks like 159.4 yards per game allowed on the ground between weeks 3 to 9.
Mhm.
Now, statistically, it's looked better. I mean, you can obviously tell me the story of how that's actually been, but for the Colts, I think they definitely want to get back to being a run-centric offense,
Mhm.
which will then hopefully breed some big shots and play action opportunities in the passing game for Richardson. But guys other than him and like Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs, who is probably more on the side of doubtful this week, more guys than that have got to show up to play.
Very good point. And actually, it did lead me into a point about Shane Steichen, because one of the things that I really admire about him as a coach, Jake, is his ability to attack what the other team does well. He'll go for your strengths, and he is not afraid to mix things up. He's a gifted play caller. This team has had difficulty in stopping the run, meaning the New England Patriots. Now, that may get a little bit better because recently the Pats have welcomed back Christian Barmore, who had been on the shelf for the
Mhm.
entire season. A lot of question as to whether or not he was even going to be able to suit up with blood clots, but he's back in the lineup, and you're starting to see the elements of him being able to assist Devon Godchaux up front and be a little bit more of a complementary piece when it comes to the Patriots stopping the run. The middle part of that defense also compromised by the loss of Juwan Bentley. So, what type of wrinkle do you think Shane might throw the New England Patriots defense if they do try to sell out to keep Jonathan Taylor in really hurting them on a lot of these big runs, which we know he's capable of doing? Just in the history between these two teams in the last couple of years, Taylor has had some monster games against the Patriots.
Yeah, the Colts offense does two things, or tries to do two things. They try to run, and if that doesn't work, it's a lot of downfield passing, a lot of things at the sticks or beyond. He Anthony Richardson does well with a lot of like layered stuff, some things over the middle to try to get some play action stuff going as well. I think I'm very interested to see how this one's going to go because Josh Downs just today, Shane Steichen said, now Josh suffered a shoulder injury last week against the Lions. He was able to come back in, but is now considered week to week. And Shane today said he's not going to rule Downs out yet, but it'll be pretty tough for him to play, especially with the Colts having the bye week next week, which was the same situation last year, though, in Germany. Josh Downs didn't practice at all in that game, that week leading into the Germany game with the Patriots, but still
Right.
played right before the bye week. So we'll see. Different injury, obviously. But yeah, sensibly, they should probably sit him with the bye week coming right up.
Mhm.
But yeah, AD Mitchell would probably be the next guy up in that situation. They have been using him more as like an X receiver that does a little bit of everything. He does a lot of short, intermediate, and long range things.
Mhm.
So that's a guy they like to move around and do a lot of different things with because he does have explosive potential, but the consistency's just not been there. Like still searching for chemistry with the quarterbacks. But yeah, if the run gets shut down, I would imagine they try to see what they could do up the middle. If that's shut down, they could try and test the edges in the run game, not necessarily with stretch plays, but with more RPO type stuff. Because they will try to go inside and out. They try to attack the interior most often, and
Right.
they've been very unsuccessful doing so. And with Christian Barmore back, that might be a fool's errand. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, they will pull the ripcord on the run game if it's not working, and it'll just be a bunch of downfield passing.
Very good point, and something that I do think New England Patriots fans, and especially the Patriots coaching staff, will need to take note of. They've been reticent or hesitant or maybe even indifferent to making the proper adjustments in game to be able to withstand what the opponent is throwing at them at any given moment. One thing you have to give credit to Indy is they are versatile in the ways that they can attack you, both on offense and on defense as well. And switching things to the defensive side of the ball, I know the Colts' run defense has not necessarily been at the top of the statistical heap, but there's a lot of talent up there. We know DeForest Buckner is a very key part of both run defense and pass defense. This team is also noted to really put pressure on quarterbacks, and they like to put pressure on quarterbacks. It's been one of the Achilles heels for New England. They simply cannot find a way to protect Drake Maye. That offensive line for New England has struggled mightily in that department. Where do you see the strengths of this Colts defense being able to stifle a New England offense, hoping to bounce back from a poor performance just a week ago?
Yeah, luckily for the Colts, one of the biggest strengths of their entire roster, maybe the biggest strength of the entire team, the defensive line, is going up against a New England front that's been kind of a disaster. So, you would think the Colts would smell blood in the water on that and just go attack, attack, attack. I mean, New England's line, I looked at it before coming on here. I don't recognize the names on that list. I think I've maybe heard of one or two guys. A lot of young guys, obviously, but they play like their name recognition kind of puts out. But no, since DeForest Buckner returned a handful of weeks ago, they've turned it up to a whole new level. The pass rush is back on the inside and out. Laiatu Latu is really starting to turn it on. He's had back-to-back weeks with a sack. Got a strip sack last week. The Colts got Tyquan Lewis back last week from IR. So this is probably the healthiest the Colts defensive line has been this season. We'll see what guys are considered on the injured list this week. But as far as the Colts' most notable injuries go right now, none of them are on the defensive line. Now, maybe something new comes up today when the injury report comes out that they didn't tell us about. But so far, the defensive line is really healthy, and it's probably the best part of the whole roster. So I think that really bodes well for them to have some success in this matchup.
Jake, I think you've given Patriots fans an excellent table to be set for Thanksgiving Day here on this crossover episode. You got a lot of appetizers for this weekend's matchup and what to keep a sharp eye on when it comes to the Indianapolis Colts and what they can do well against the New England Patriots. But in just a moment, Jake Arthur and I are going to flip the script, and Jake is going to put me on the hot seat. He's going to grill me on items that he hopes Colts fans will want to know. There's been getting a clearer picture of the 3-9 New England Patriots. All this and more when this crossover Thursday episode of Locked On Patriots and Locked On Colts continues, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Locked On listeners, today's show is sponsored by our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Don't delay, do it today. FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Patriots fans and Colts fans, thank you for joining us here today. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you that are viewing this crossover Thursday episode on the Locked On Podcast Network. Jake Arthur, host of Locked On Colts, Mike Debate, host of Locked On Patriots, as we get you ready for kickoff at 1 p.m. on Sunday, Gillette Stadium, Foxborough, Massachusetts, Patriots and Colts, renewing the rivalry in New England. And Jake, now it's really time to cross the streams, my friend, because I'm going to hand the keys over to you. I'm going to let you put me on the hot seat. What are Colts fans eager to learn more about when it comes to the 2024 New England Patriots?
Yes, obviously when I look at the Patriots, especially the offensive side of the ball, this is something I actually asked Zaire Franklin today. So obviously the offensive line is not going well. It's kind of making you maybe get a look at some of Drake Maye's strengths and ad-lib abilities that maybe you don't always want to see because it means he's running for his life. But we see a lot of it with Anthony Richardson as well. So what difference has that made? Obviously, Jacoby Brissett is a lot more stationary of a player. But when you have an offensive line that's that leaky, but now you switch to a guy like Drake Maye who can make plays and is very creative, what difference has that made? Like, is the leaky offensive line in pass pro as big of a deal? Like, what's Drake's efficiency like when he's out there moving on his own?
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the head, Jake. It's the big playability that the Patriots have now under Drake Maye that they didn't necessarily have with Jacoby Brissett. Look, I've covered Jacoby since he was a rookie here coming in under Jimmy Garoppolo and Tom Brady. So Jacoby's gone a whole long way. From his time in Indianapolis and his time throughout the league, he's a journeyman quarterback. He's someone that will give you 110% every time he takes the ball. He knows a lot about the game. There's nothing you're going to confuse him about. But you're right, he is more of a stationary quarterback, and that does have limitations when your offensive line is not only yielding a lot of pressure, when it comes to opposing defenses, but they're also hurting themselves with a lot of pre-snap penalties. The Patriots had 10 penalties accepted against them last Sunday against the Dolphins. That's unsustainable. You're not going to be able to build an offensive line with those types of problems that you're having before the snap even occurs. So what Drake is able to do is use his feet, use his acumen to be able to roll out, get out of the pocket, make things happen where if Jacoby was in a similar situation, he probably would simply just take the sack or throw the ball away and you're not advancing the ball. With Drake, you have that opportunity to make the play down the field. He can make things happen either with his legs or with an explosive pass down the field. And that can invigorate a team looking to try to find an identity. The problem with that is he's been under pressure more than you want a rookie quarterback under pressure. And that can lead to decision-making problems. It can lead to second guessing. It can also lead to a quarterback getting hurt. And a couple of weeks ago, Drake spent some time in concussion protocol. He didn't miss a game because of it, but that's always a concern when you're looking at a young quarterback. You don't want to get him injured early on. So there is a fine line that needs to be walked at this point. The Colts come in here as a team that does show a lot of prowess of being able to get after the quarterback. You mentioned, that you talked to Zaire earlier this week. We mentioned DeForest Buckner in the previous segment, a name that I know you've been waiting for me to drop because we always do when we cross the streams here, is my old classmate at Bishop Hendricken High School, and that is Kwity Paye, who leads the team with 5.5 sacks. So these guys can get after the quarterback. You need someone like Drake Maye to be able to mitigate that porous offensive line up front. He does a much better job and gives them a much better chance to win. But at the same time, there's always that concern because the offensive line has been that bad.
Yeah, that's always tough to see. And I mean, you want to give your rookies obviously every little ounce of room to grow that they can. But some guys really flourish in that situation. Caleb Williams is a guy who once they kind of let him start to get a little more creative with it again, turn it on a little bit. So maybe the same with Drake Maye. As far as kind of skill position guys go, Ramondre Stevenson obviously is someone who the Colts have to be cognizant of. But Stevenson, I'm assuming is still, a decent threat to any team. But what about in the passing game? Like Hunter Henry, I'm a big Kendrick Bourne guy. Like, who are the big couple guys in the passing game that the Colts really need to keep an eye out for?
Well, Hunter Henry is absolutely public enemy number one if you're a Colts fan. Hunter is not only a weapon in the red zone, but he is also someone that can make things happen in the open field. Hunter is a much better route runner than he gets credit for at the tight end position. Very gifted runner. Learned a lot from Keenan Allen when the two played together in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So he's someone that I would definitely dedicate resources to being able to stop, because when Drake is in trouble, he's going to look for Hunter. And Hunter's been well covered the last couple of weeks for that reason. So you're looking at Drake now trying to find other guys on this team to step up. Ironically, his counterpart at the tight end position, Austin Hooper, has done just that the last couple of weeks. Had some nice touchdown catches. He's been running crisper and cleaner routes, and he's been showing some sure hands. So that's a guy that you want to make sure is well covered. Not a whole lot of productivity at the wide receiver position. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's been the reality for the New England Patriots. Kayshon Boutte started the season, started to look like a guy that could be a reliable target for Drake Maye. But the last couple of games, he's pretty much been MIA. Demario Douglas has had difficulty getting into the swing of things, really primarily more of a slot weapon, but Demario hasn't really been putting up a lot of great stats lately either. The rookie tandem of Jalen Polk and Javon Baker have been nearly invisible this season. And Baker, it's been a lot because he hasn't seen the field that much. He's still being tutored behind the scenes to learn the nuances of the pro game. But you can only play the rookie card for so long, and you have to start showing some prowess and start to show a budding relationship with your quarterback. So unfortunately, from the skill positions, New England hasn't had much outside of Ramondre Stevenson running the ball. And of course, tight end tandem has been pretty much non-existent for the rest of the Patriot squad.
All right, my last one for you before we move on is about this defense and specifically in coverage, because it makes a difference when we're talking Anthony Richardson. Does Gerard Mayo lean more man coverage, or is he more of a zone guy? Because Anthony is more dangerous on the ground and through the air when it's man coverage.
Yeah, without question. The Patriots have been much more comfortable when it comes to man coverage. They've played man coverage regularly. When they do switch to zone, this team has had problems. And that is, I believe, going to be a problematic situation for the Pats this weekend. Because, like you said, Anthony Richardson is someone that is versatile enough to be able to adjust his game to where your opponent is weak. And I think that could be a problem for the Patriots. Look, Christian Gonzalez has proven to be a very good lockdown corner, and he's someone that can lock down his opponent. But get to the other side of the perimeter and you get to the slot, Patriots corners have struggled, whether it be Jonathan Jones or Marcus Jones in the slot. They had a very tough game against Miami last weekend, similarly built to Indy, where you have a lot of pass catching weapons and guys that can hurt you in various ways. Deep in the secondary in the safety position, Kyle Duggar has really struggled without the presence of Jabril Peppers. He's been injured, so a lot of the injury concerns that he's had have really affected his game. Jabril right now is off the commissioner's exempt list. He is practicing with the team, but we don't know whether or not he'll actually give it a go this weekend. If he does, that does bring a little bit of swagger and a little bit of toughness back to that secondary. But ultimately, New England right now and those man coverage schemes are going to be very difficult to shut down Indy. I go back to what the Rams did a couple of weeks ago. That's a very difficult team to be able to play man coverage against because their quarterback is so adept at being able to get to it. I think Indy presents a lot of the same problems. And unfortunately, New England didn't show me much against the Rams to lead me to believe that they're anywhere more equipped to handle a team that can really slice up their man cover defense.
Well, it sounds like these are two teams just really exceeding expectations. What do you say we get to it in a minute and see what we think is going to happen?
Absolutely, folks. Keys to victory coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network when Crossover Thursday continues. Locked On Patriots, Locked On Colts on Thanksgiving Day. Locked On listeners, we've all been there. You want tickets to the big game on the gridiron, or maybe you want to check out some action on the hardwood or even on the ice, or simply want to be there when your favorite music or comedy act comes to town. Well, Game Time is your best destination to help you make your memories. Game Time is the fastest and easiest method I've ever used to buy tickets, and it's not even close. And here's something I know you all are going to love. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. That makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I especially love their zone deals where you pick the section, Game Time picks the seats for big savings. So don't delay, do it today. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Patriots fans and Colts fans, once again, we are crossing the streams here on Crossover Thanksgiving Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Mike Debate of Locked On Patriots, Jake Arthur, one half of the hosting tandem of Locked On Colts. And Jake, as the late, great Gorilla Monsoon would say if this were WrestleMania, the time for the talk is just about over, my friend. If the Colts are to come into New England and earn the victory, defeat the Patriots, remain in the playoff race, what would you say are Indy's keys to victory?
Yeah, so last week against, for my money, the best team in the league, the Lions, the Colts did an awesome job of beating themselves. Not to say that they could have beat the Lions, but they could have made it a lot more interesting than it wound up being. I'll tell you a scary story real quick in several parts. All right, so I mentioned the blocking was bad. There was problems with discipline and everything. The offense last week only had 2 players with a pass blocking grade considered above average. Everyone else awful. Run blocking was worse. They only had 1 guy with really a passable grade in run blocking. This according to PFF. In terms of receiving, I mentioned, they'd been dropping the ball. There was miscommunications and everything. They had 3 guys, Kylan Granson, Ashton Dulin, and Drew Ogletree, all with grades below 50. Essentially last week, if you weren't Michael Pittman Jr. or Josh Downs, you weren't contributing. It was ugly there. And then you mentioned the Patriots had 10 penalties last week. So did the Colts, 8 of them on offense. a lot of pre-snap stuff as well. Really uncharacteristic, like Quentin Nelson, for example, not been having a good time. And then defensively, missed tackles were a big problem. They had 15 of them, which led to 175 yards after the catch for Detroit and 110 yards rushing after contact. So I say all that to say this: it cannot get much worse. If there's so much that they did to themselves last week, and it's very uncharacteristic. Maybe not the missed tackles, but like a lot of the penalties and everything. They wiped out about 96, 97 yards from gains because of penalties. So if you just clean any of that up, like, you'll be fine. So I think defensively, if they go ahead and attack, I think the push that the Colts defensive line is going to be able to get will really help the linebackers, EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin, look like them old selves. They've been part of the problem when it comes to the middle of the Colts defense getting gashed. So I like the Colts defensive front to help the entire front seven get back on track. And then offensively, I think the Colts are going to be a little more efficient. I am interested to see if A.D. Mitchell getting into the lineup in case Josh Downs can't go, if that helps make things more explosive. Again, I mentioned the Colts really, really want to get the run game going. They have two guys who can do it, Jonathan Taylor and Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to have some faith that they get some things figured out and clean up some of the self-inflicted wounds. But, O-line play, just play normally. Again, I think they're probably going to make a switch at right guard this week. Catch the ball and be where you're supposed to be and running your routes. And then just make tackles on defense. Like, this sounds like I'm a high school coach grilling these things into my players, but this is an NFL team having these fundamental problems right now. But you just clean up those things that every coach will tell you have to master, and I think you're going to be fine.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel the same way. It is a professional football team, but yet we constantly talk about the fundamentals not being executed, and it leads to bigger problems on the field for both teams. And you're going to hear me talk about that with the New England Patriots in just a moment, because that is one of my keys to victory for the Pats: clean up the intangibles. But I think if New England is going to have any hope of being able to beat Indy this weekend and come in and play spoiler, I think on offense, they need to establish the run. And I think a lot of people will look at this team and say, well, with Drake Maye, you really need to air the ball out and the run needs to be more complementary. But when an Alex Van Pelt offense is working at its best, that running game, that outside zone running game, is facilitating everything you're doing in the play action game. It's allowing Drake to take shots down the field. It's giving him the room to be able to go off script and make plays when things go awry. And it's also giving him the opportunity to use the intermediate areas of the field to hit for short yardage gains. If the Patriots are working on all cylinders, that running game is working. So that's going to be key one for the Pats. Establish the run early. Try to put Indy on its heels. If they can do that, they have a chance to keep this game close, and I think it'll be manageable. The second key for the Pats, and we talked a little bit about this in the previous segment, is trying to control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I mentioned that the Patriots are most comfortable in man coverage schemes, and I expressed a little bit of concern as to whether or not the Patriots would even be able to defend that, because they had so many problems against the Rams just a couple of weeks ago. I understand that Indy doesn't put as much motion into their offense as the Rams do, but they have an army of great blocking receivers, and for a play caller as gifted as Shane Steichen, who's someone who will adapt to what his opponent does not do well and try to use it against them, I worry about the New England Patriots' ability to play through that, because I think that's going to be very difficult for the Pats to adjust. They haven't shown an ability to do it yet. Coaching staff is going to have to be much more alert and aware of what their opponents are doing to give them a puncher's chance. And finally, Jake, I end with cleaning up the intangibles. New England Patriots are too futile on third down. They only converted 3 of 14 attempts last week. Again, I come back to the 10 penalties, lack of communication in the field, not a lot of continuity that you're seeing on this defense, and it's leading to big plays and gash plays against this club that's putting them in holes early. If the Pats are even thinking about trying to pull the upset, all those intangibles have to be much better. If they're average or below average on any of those, Indy walks away with the win, and I don't have a doubt about that.
I like it. The Colts really need to win. I mean, they're in the playoff hunt right now only because the rest of the AFC is a logjam, and there's only a few teams that really seem to want to be in the playoffs, it seems. So that's why they're still alive. Like every time the Colts lose, it feels like the Texans do as well. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the games where you cannot afford to lose. Like they have 5 more games remaining, and there's only one of them that's against a team that probably should beat them, and that's the Broncos. The rest of these, the Colts are facing cellar-dwelling teams, so they cannot afford to lose a game like this.
Jake, what can I say? It's always an honor, always a privilege to join you on these crossovers. I love crossing the streams with you, my friend. Who knows? Maybe sometime down the line, we'll be crossing the streams again in the postseason, and we can bring what is, in my opinion, one of the NFL's great rivalries back into prominence. But bottom line, folks, we will still enjoy this game coming up this weekend. 1 p.m. kickoff from Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts, the Indianapolis Colts and the New England Patriots. Don't forget, check out Jake Arthur and his partner, Zach Hicks, on Locked On Colts. If you are not an everyday Pats fans, I encourage you to be. I am. I know you'll love each and everything that these guys put out on a daily basis. Some of the best content you'll find anywhere on the network is on Locked On Colts. And of course, if you're a Colts fan and you want to keep your friends close and your enemies closer, and you want to hear a little bit about the days of Tom Brady, you can always check me out 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, as all of us here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And just like Locked On Colts, Locked On Patriots, all the shows here on our great network are free and available on all platforms and a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On behalf of Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, I'm Mike Debate, wishing all of you to stay safe, stay well, be the change you wish to see in the world. Once again, a sincere happy Thanksgiving to all of you and your families out there, and we'll see you back here again next time on Locked On Patriots and Locked On Colts on the Locked On Podcast Network.